we spend. We typically meet, so typical schedule for a board of trustees is 2 meetings per month. So on off, I'm alternating Tuesdays, and then there's usually a study session between those 2 meetings. So that leaves us with 3 meetings a month, unless we call a special meeting. It appears that many months we do call a special meeting, so we will do 4 meetings a month typically. A meeting for us, a typical meeting is 4 hours. And we sometimes go over by anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. So we've had 7-hour marathon meetings before, when there's been topics that generate a lot of conversation or feedback. On the Friday prior to any meeting, we receive a study packet via email. That study packet is anywhere from 1,100 to 2,000 pages typically. It has every piece of detail for every application that's set before us, all the due diligence for plan developments, all the stuff that came from the planning commission, all the stuff they got to see comes to us. And so I keep track of my hours. And so when I did my quarterly update, I guess it wasn't quarterly, it was January, February. I clocked about 60 hours for January and February. From June until December, I clocked 150 hours. So it varies. That also does not include responding to resident emails and concerns. We do a lot of speaking engagements in town, we go to schools, we do ribbon cuttings, we do groundbreakings. We meet with business owners to discuss potential projects that they would be interested in bringing to town. Many of the trustees, you'll hear them share, they go to various regional board and commission meetings. Some testify for the state on various issues. I also meet with the regional mayors and county commissioners fairly regularly to talk about issues of concern for the area. So it's quite a bit. I would say I've probably burned 100 hours of PTO since being mayor, doing town business. So yeah.
So it probably comes around 57 cents an hour.
Probably. Yeah, it's largely a volunteer position. I recognize that it's public service. I do it because I want to. I don't do it because I have to. And I believe in what I'm doing. I'm committed to it. I'm sure that every trustee would say the same thing. I know you guys are considering whether to pay, more for what we do. The trend in regional governments, if you look at what's happened in Fort Collins, they went to a pay system that's quite a bit higher than everyone else in the area. I think that's going to be more of the trend. A typical mayor, and I only know of 3 full-time, like strong, not necessarily strong mayors, but like 3, strong mayors. So there's Colorado Springs, Denver, and Aurora. The rest are all similar structure to us. The Boulder mayor put his career on hold to be mayor full-time, but it doesn't pay full-time salary. So in my opinion, that puts governments in a position where you have an inequitable portion of people that would be able to represent. So you're going to be led by people who are either independently wealthy or retired, who can have that type of schedule flexibility. There are occasionally people who are business owners that can really flex their schedule. I'm fortunate enough that I'm really flexible with my schedule. So my work schedule, I can work Saturdays instead of Tuesdays if I need to be able to make up time, and I do. And so, I think the relative pay that we have, when you compare to what happens in other cities in this region that are about our size or about the size we will be at build out, it is very low. But I also recognize that the public doesn't necessarily understand the amount of time that goes into supporting this role. They think it's just 3 or 4 meetings a month, and it's so much more than that. The meetings are probably the least of what we have to do.
So how many hours a month do you think you average?
I would say we're in a slower season right now, I would say. So in the slower periods, we're probably, well, for me, probably 40 to 60 hours a month. And then in the busy season, I've spent 100 hours a month. There's a conference coming up that I have to go to. I'm gonna have to take a couple days vacation to go to. There's a few other regional conferences that are coming up that that we should be represented at. That's going to take a few days off of work. A lot of those things are done during the week or during the business day. So it's a lot. And I know I took up a lot of time, so I apologize. I'll pass it to the trustees.
Pretty well, it makes it easier for us.
Answer the question.
Yeah,
That's directly correlated.
Yeah.
There's an amount.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, during the slow times when we have less meetings, it's probably minimum 20 hours a week. Or sorry, 20 hours a month, but it becomes at least 40 hours a month because of the regular meetings, the study sessions, reviewing the agenda items, the liaisonships for current town boards as well as those regional boards. And then, as the mayor said, there's everything else. There are the communications with residents. There's items that we might find out about that we reach out to town staff about. We also have, the only thing that you didn't mention was the one-on-ones with Malcolm and Melissa. So that's another item, and that is scheduled for an hour, but can go a little longer depending on the agenda or the topics to discuss. So it isn't that we're doing this for the money. Let's just make that clear. Obviously, there's not a lot of pay to it. We do it because we love this town and we want to make sure that we have the best leadership for this town. At the same time, I understand where you guys are coming from about the potential of getting other individuals to step forward if there were additional pay. As the mayor said, typically you need to have a job that understands the commitment to the town. I'm fortunate enough to work for a company where it is lenient in terms of when the work is accomplished. So that doesn't mean that I'm working on the weekends, whether that's for the town or for my job. But it sometimes gets to the point where you feel like you're burning the candle at both ends. That is for sure. So.
Yeah, it was answered so well. I'm not sure how I can follow up you guys, but I will just say that I think my first 2 years as trustee, I think there was more time at that point than there was recently. And let's say as you come on board, there's different processes and things that you're learning. And I had unlike some on the board, I know Trustee Harrison, Trustee Sowish, Trustee Hoback had worked on the planning commission before, so they kind of had a lot of quasi judicial experience before. I had not. It was my first time. I'd been on some smaller boards for like a church and a nonprofit, but I'd never been in this capacity. So I think when you're first starting out, there is quite a bit of time that's just taken up just learning the process and understanding how you're supposed to be doing things. The other thing I would say is that I think recently Mayor Brooks has done a good job at keeping the meetings a little more efficient, and I think there's an onus on keeping getting out of the meetings at 10:30. And I know my first 2 years on the board that didn't always happen. I think some of that too, when we were on Zoom, I think it wasn't necessarily anybody's fault, but since you're already home and you're watching on there, I think people were a little more accepting in the meetings running later. But we haven't had too many like 1 o'clock in the morning meetings, I don't think, yeah, so, yeah.
We've had one since like.
Yeah, so it's been much better in that regard. So hopefully going forward, that could be the trend. The other thing I would say is that and I agree that nobody's doing this for money. It's finding I feel for you guys because finding that calculation between what is a fair compensation for someone's time versus and as Mayor Brooks put, equity as far as, making sure that somebody who's in a financial position that they could be doing this full time, that for those of us that are still holding day jobs, that you can have somebody represent in either case. But I do think the one thing to keep in mind is that we're very much like the board of directors. Mr. Fleming is town administrator, and as you move into town manager, they're the COO of the town, and so they're the ones that really are making sure that the day-to-day operations are running. And so in other municipalities like Denver, it's very different. They have a strong mayor system. The mayor can override the city council. So I'd say even as a board of trustees, we're more typical of what you see around this area as far as the duties of mayor and board members. So that's something to keep in mind, that you don't necessarily have to have a mayor or a board that is in a full-time capacity. And I think that as you're comparing these things, and I know some of the other charters you guys have been looking at, some of those have commonalities with us, some of them don't. I would say, I know you guys were looking at Eagle, and they're a very different animal than what we are. I think we're more typical to Lafayette, Broomfield, even our neighbors to the east, and Frederick and Firestone. So yep. Yep.
Not a whole lot to add to what's already been said. Food for thought, I suppose, is I do think there is, in terms of, been talk about compensation, and obviously public service should not be viewed as an opportunity as a job, and yet it is a time commitment. And that said, I think that it also balancing act to be considered in that, I think the mayor puts in multiples of what trustees need to put in due to interactions with other mayors and just performing the role. So, any compensation ideas or other whatever factors go into the charter should recognize that the mayor is a mayoral role is much more of a time commitment than the trustees. It just is. So I think that's probably all I had to add to what's already been said.
I don't have a 9-to-5 job, so this is kind of my 9-to-5 job. So I have no paid time off. So I don't know if you guys got to see Melissa's presentation last Tuesday about women in government. Really good if you guys get a chance to go back and look that up. But one of the things she talks about is invisible work, and the women generally, she has a lot of data points, and I encourage you to watch that so you can support these ideas with the data. But women carry a lot of the load with invisible work as far as our families and caretaking at home, and all of the other things, even within the structure. And so I do feel like that is something that I bring along with me everywhere. I don't get time off from those things. I just carry it with me. But it's important for me. I look at this role as a volunteer, basically a volunteer position. And it's my privilege to be here, so I try to show up as a community as much as I can, and I attend every community event I can, and I often bring my kids and all the police department ceremonies, and let's see, Dan and I volunteer for senior lunch, and I'm doing a Meals on Wheels thing in a couple weeks, and doing Democracy Day, and anytime I get an invitation from schools or groups like that, I try to be available and attend those things. I also testify at the legislature and AQCC and the CRGCC when I'm asked to, and it seems appropriate. I'm assigned to 3 external commissions and was elected to one of those boards on accident. And so, and so then I also serve on that board. And then I have 3 internal advisory boards, one that just moved to a task force, so we'll see how that all shakes out. And so each of those meetings, those are at least three meetings a month, so that's 6 meetings a month, and then also the Board of Trustees is 3 meetings a month, and then unless we have special meetings. And then to Trustee Bell's point, I spend a lot of time studying and looking up acronyms, like that should be like a line item on the, how much time do trustees spend? If you go to a transportation planning meeting, in fact, you can look at my notebook, I would write them in my margins, like Google this later. So I spend a lot of time studying. But so, yeah, usually 9 to 12 meetings a month studying, and then any other thing I can attend. And it's usually nights and weekends, so that's it.
Yeah, I think, now echo what all the rest of the board members have said. I think the time commitment is rather dramatic depending on the role. So to put it in proper perspective and compensation perspective for people who are on watching. So the mayor, if I remember correctly, compensation is $600 a month, correct? They're about, yeah, but and that excludes other things that are associated with that are expensive. If I'm correct, right? So in the expense part, and other things that travel to and fro. And for trustees, it's $300 a month. So you already have an understanding about the amount of hours that we put in for the money. So before, I think probably of all the trustees here, and probably from the public service perspective, I probably have the most years on in this capacity. So planning commission and this. And so before coming on the planning commission, there were a lot of things in social media that talked about how people were planning commission and trustees were bought and say paid for by oil and gas or developers or whatever, and I would have to say that's a definitive no on that. And we do this out of desire for public service and to make it very better and to really try to improve it in the sense of taking it from where it was as an adolescent, so to speak, a number of years ago to an adulthood kind of phase. And this was part of that conversation was do we go home? And so I think as a town that's growing as dramatically as it is with a population that's ever changing, people coming, people going, different ethnic backgrounds and so forth, which I think are always better for any community because it really enriches what we do. I think from that perspective, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of things that the board of trustees, the planning commissions, all the different boards that we have, they're set up, all people volunteer, have a lot on their plate, and it's not as simple as people think. And we do deal with a lot of complicated issues that come up. A lot of those, we're not all lawyers. So those issues that do come up, we rely on our staff. And I have to say that one of the key things that when Trustee Bell and Trustee Coughlin and I came on board a couple years ago was we saw right away the need for having an effective staff and you have the bandwidth to do things that are needed. And so we took a look at what that return on investment would be for the town, along with the other board and the previous mayor, and then took that into the current board now to say, our criteria is staff meaning when they come to us with requests to say, hey, this is, we need a traffic engineer. We need DEI dedicated person for that. Because we don't have that experience, and to do that on a volunteer basis and not have somebody who's professional does a disservice to the town. And so, and it's service to that person, frankly, who has to take on that responsibility. And so we want the right people, and when I mean right, I mean people who are experienced, knowledgeable, who've done this before. Have the intellectual capability to critically analyze things that come up, as complex as they are. And balance what's best for the town and not so much for any particular interests or what have you, but really is for what the town is. And there are decisions that may be made that aren't popular, but when you dig beneath it all, you realize, oh, that's the reason why they came up with that decision, is because there might have been some statutory limitation that we were that we had to adhere to, or budgetary, those kind of things. And so those are things that I think from a trustee's perspective, we always have to look at. And as and the rest of the boards look to us for that leadership and that advisory capacity. So I myself am on, I think, about similar amount as you and 3 other boards, Dr. Todd being one of them, Denver Council of Regional Governments. And that has a lot to do with transit and housing. Also the Boulder Sub-County Regional Forum, some others that are more local that we're trying to do a lot. So I think from that perspective, whoever you know, when we go down that road of home rule, the amount of time and the type of people that you want to have run for those positions are going to be key to making sure that you're moving forward in a positive direction. And I think from a compensation perspective, that's obviously up to you all. It's a lot of work, and you want to attract the best, and you want to have the best practices in place to do the work. So I think overall, when you take that into account, those are the things that are significantly important to focus on.
So Sarah, the question was, how much time do we spend generally in a month?
I'm in it.
So I've had a little bit different situation over the last 1.5 years, and believe me, I would change it if I could. Although allergy season kicking in and the monster dose of Benadryl, I do miss that a little bit. Anyway, sorry. When I ran, it was because there weren't very many. There was only one other woman on the board. And one of the things that I was finding was we spend a lot of time talking about things like regional transportation plans and things like that, but really noticing things that are happening on a neighborhood level was a big piece of why I ran. And you know, it's not necessarily that I'm an expert. I'm a mom who walks my kid to school every day. And a couple pieces to note, like, one of the blessings, I guess, of COVID was I was, you know, at the time my husband was traveling, or prior to running, my husband was traveling every 3 weeks. I have had at the time a 2-year-old, he's now 5. And things like childcare, things like childcare can make meetings that go till 1 o'clock in the morning seem untenable. You know, last night this week we met till what, 11:15 or so. And I walked in and my husband was sound asleep. My husband had made his best effort to get him to sleep, but my son comes running down the stairs. Mommy, I waited up for you. That happens on a regular basis. And so I think one of the things that I am really noticing about this job is it's a total blessing, and I love being able to interact with people in this town and notice things. And you know, it was a really exciting thing to tell folks in my neighborhood, hey, like, we did the traffic study, we're getting 4-way stops, we're getting lighted crosswalks, we're getting things like that. Although I'm already arguing for another 4-way stop, but You know, I think a couple pieces, the $300 a month that we started out, that ends up being more like $270 once they take taxes out of it. You know, was not necessarily part of why I ran, and yet sometimes things like the extra 4 or 5 meetings a month make some of that cost prohibitive for women. The timing on certain things. That might say, oh, well, I am a mom, I am a working mom, like not working is not an option for me. You know, my husband and I made the decision early on that, you know, saving that $1,800 a month, that is the average cost of childcare was something that, I've been working and a full-time mom as long as my son's been around. Now school is a blessing, but I guess a couple things like meeting timing. I know there have been debates about why we do public meetings over Zoom and things like that. I gotta say, like, it makes things so much more accessible. And if I get anything done, have gotten anything done on my term as trustee, there are 2 pieces. One was the honor of my lifetime, really pushing for that police task force, because I think we don't have like the community police relations issue that other communities across the metro area have. And that's been done amazingly intentionally. And it was something that was done that brought all voices in. So I'm extraordinarily proud of the work that our mayor did and with our department. And then the second piece, frankly, is the, hey, like, you know, Red Hawk Elementary could really use a traffic study. Or, you know, Flatiron Meadows, you know, 2/3 or at least half the kids in the school have to cross a somewhat major artery that's being used more and more as a major artery. In town, we need some stop signs. Or being able to say things like, you know, the new parks that were proposed the other night are amazing. And at the same time, let's talk about making them useful to moms who want to ride their bikes across town, or, you know, want to take advantage of all the parks because our kids get bored. And how can we make those as connected and user-friendly as possible? And I think on the compensation piece, I think certainly I would say I'd probably spend 30 to 50 hours depending on the month, when you count, you know, various things. But then there's also the side pieces to that of, I am at my school on a day-to-day basis. I am talking with teachers and teachers' aides and other moms who notice things going on. I, you know, am excited to be getting out and about more than I was the last like year or so. You know, I also have had people who have reached out. I've been fairly public about my breast cancer diagnosis, and I've had a number of folks reach out, and it kind of blew me away with hey, thanks for bringing the perspective of people who can't leave their houses because of COVID, and taking sort of the left, right, red, blue politics out of it, because it's not a matter that we can't, like, you know, we want a mask. It's a must. It's we can't leave our houses because our lungs are compromised or whatever. And so between me kind of listening and keeping an ear to the ground, and yes, I've tuned off of Facebook. I find it makes me a much happier human being, or I'm selective about when I tune in. But I just think, like, if we're looking at accessibility from a community space, and then from my vantage point, again, the why I ran was to bring this sort of like, what's it like to be be a community resident in Erie on a day-to-day basis of things like getting across town. Takes me 25 minutes to get, often takes 25 minutes to get from my house in Flatiron Meadows out to King Supers on Highway 7. It's things like, you know, are we welcoming to all of our church communities? Are we, you know, diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And can I, you know, get the food I want? Are the neighbors in my neighborhood across the community feeling safe? And so it's it's the 40 or 50 hours a week that are tangible and dedicated to meetings. But then I also think it's bringing in the perspective. I hear Trustee Bear talk about getting across Bonanza. I hear Trustee Harrison often talking about getting his daughter to soccer, or what it's like growing up in, accessibility to parks. I hear our mayor talk about accessibility with the police, so it's bringing in all of those sort of intangible perspectives. And thinking about, like, are we making sure that residents feel that they have a voice, and what's guiding us when some residents do, or some residents feel that they don't. And yes, there are going to be values places that are not, not something, or that become an impasse, but there's also the day-to-day, what is it like to be a resident of Erie? And I would say that's the intangible that adds a number of hours to this, is like, oh, so who should I talk to about the fact that, I don't know, I use Flatiron Meadows a lot, but like, a couple years ago, we can't get out on Arapahoe, we can't get out on Erie Parkway. Who do we talk to about the fact that, like, we have like no arteries coming through our neighborhood to actually get out on? And it's, thinking about some of those things at night. That was not very articulate, but.
No, you're not. I think one other thing is if the future only, whoever is on that council, trustees, or whatever you want to call it, is we're the increasing regionalism that we have to go to, and working with our partners in other communities that are surrounding us. And that most of that impact, obviously, people can see, which is the constant traffic increase on Highway 7, which impact Lafayette, Louisville, Erie, Broomfield, the constant growth that Broomfield is going through, the 8,000, 9,000. They're going to be going in on I-25 and south of Highway 7, that whole area. So what happens there impacts what happens with us, and vice versa. And so we want to be good stewards and good neighbors. And I think from that perspective, those different groups and those other demands that are there, that kind of role also adds to the hours that we have. And so, but to Trustee Laughlin's point, is the fact that it is, we all came into this with trying to make Erie a better place. What that means is transit, safety, business opportunities. During the first 2 years of COVID, when we were elected to the board, our first meeting was sitting there going, okay, remember, it's like, what are we going to do to save the economy of the town during this downturn? And so that was our first #1 goal. Malcolm was extremely helpful, and he had, how long had you been in the role at that time? About a year. And so he was getting up to speed. But his experience being in Louisville and other places helped tremendously with that. And so I think we, again, as a board, we look to our staff who are amazing in their expertise and their background experience. It doesn't mean that everybody's perfect. We all are human, we all make mistakes. But I think from that perspective is what the staff came up with, what we as board members said, hey, we would like to take a look at and focus on. They were able to kind of meld into that to the point where more than in other towns, we have been successful in writing that out and trying to stabilize the economy as much as we could. But that was only because of the analysis that the staff did, we taking that information in, absorbing it, critically thinking about it, putting the hours in to come up with our own questions and ideas and how do we figure this out. And we intentionalize that for everything that we do. And so I think probably for us, I mean, I'm glad I was bald beforehand. So, but I think for people who take on these roles in those kind of situations, you get gray hairs and you get stressed because you realize that what you're doing and what the staff is doing is it's gonna have a direct impact on the residents you have, but also regionally. And so I think just my own counsel is that going forward, the increase in regional cooperation is going to be tremendous when it comes to transit, when it comes to safety, it comes to schools. All of that right now is going to be huge because you have RTD and others who may not have the budget because their ridership is down. And that has a direct impact in regard to what's available. And so we have to look elsewhere. And so I think that we need, for those people who are going to run in the future, they have to understand that and they have to look at it. So I echo everybody else, having that about 30 to 50 hours that I put in. Unfortunately, I don't have the flexibility that others do to be able to go out to the community and to talk to people because of my job. But if something does come up, I work to support each of the trustees here and mayor as well. And I'm trying to move that forward.
So I do want to add one thing, so. Compared to previous boards in terms of the liaisonships of boards, commissions, whether that's in the town or the regional ones. There have been a lot more that have been created within the past few years that this board has been showing up as. There's also some that they might have been defunct or might not have been meeting. And they were reinvigorated and they started up. I know Trustee Harrison has a couple that they've been more active recently, especially with some of the projects that are going on. So I know this board has really prioritized making sure that we show up if we are a liaison to make sure that we have representation, because that is the biggest thing, to have a seat at that table. Or if it's a internal board and commission where we're supporting them in their efforts.
I guess to add on that, one of the big growth points that's occurred since Trustee Harrison, Bell and I took office is one of the things I think the three of us agreed on when we started in this job was like, we really need to get more active in approaching our neighbors. And so, we tried to make that difference up until this last election. One of the biggest things I have to compliment you on, Mayor Brooks, is the fact that you've been incredibly intentional. We've now met with both school boards as a board. We've now met with at least Boulder County, and Commissioner Sane has now had an active role in our in our URA and is actively working with our town. We have had joint study sessions with Broomfield, with Lafayette, with and I think conversations with Dacono and Frederick in the works. And so one of the things I will say to the regional point, it does make a difference, because I was laughing the night that we had our Broomfield when I was taking pictures as Trustee Bear was driving, and we were, for whatever reason, MapQuest took us down 111.
Yeah.
Which was not plowed or and it was coming down in buckets. But I do think that's another piece of all of this is, the regionalism and intentionally having regular conversations with our counterparts in other places. Because the things you learn about what's happening in other towns, I had initially thought the baseline was going to be on the south side was going to be 6,000 houses. It's going to be 9,000 houses, and they're looking at a small format grocery store. And so it's things like that. The add time that's not necessarily accounted for. It's, Mayor Brooks, really getting involved with, and then one of the big differences I've seen is really bringing back to our board meetings and back to things like what he's finding out and the things that he's learning and the collaborations that he's been able to make through really being involved with that Metro Mayor's Caucus. And so I think it's some of those things that in the long run, and I feel like it's already making a difference. I don't know. I feel like it's already making a difference in terms of, Erie started showing up. And that's kind of an exciting place to be, right?
I think to add just one more thing to that,
There are no short answers, guys. Politicians.
I just want to keep in mind, we only have like 2 hours, so if they have more questions, may I ask the board to keep your
Yeah, yep,
answers a little bit shorter?
Just one added point.
It's not my meeting, otherwise I would have done that. The bottom line is there's a ton that the public doesn't see. And there's a ton that you don't want to see in terms of being the public that we handle behind the scenes. And it's all for the public good. To sum up your question or the answer to your question, we devote a lot of our time and our emotion and our passion to the town. And it's real hard to put a dollar figure on that. So I think that if the choice to make is, do you decide what to put in the charter? Or do we decide by ordinance what to put on the ballot or what to put in action? I think if the trustees do it, it's more of a political hot potato. And it comes off as board greed. Even though as we explained, you can't afford to pay us enough. And so it's not really that. And I think that should you guys take on putting that either in the charter or on the ballot separate from the charter, I think that it is more of a structural, not structural, what's the word I'm looking for infrastructure type of a thing. You know, you need roads to get places. You need board members who are committed or able to commit their time to this effort. So
We'll sit through an hour just education on roadways.
yeah, I mean, that's our 2 cents for what it's worth. Again, your call to make. I think if you leave it up to us, we'll be more apt to not address it just because of the political nature of money. And I think that does not serve our residents well. But that's our opinion on it.
You said one last point. Oh, I think the point really was to what we were able to accomplish, just working with our neighbors and for transit and stuff and showing up for Erie. We had, our transportation engineer encouraged a lot of us board members to attend the RTC meeting, I believe it was. And where we advocated on Erie's behalf to be able to get the extension of Lafayette funding for Lafayette Flex Ride, which would be an extension of their service in Erie, taking the best practice from that, which is going to be funded without, I think, free Flex Ride. And we're also funding for Super Flex Ride, which is going to be extending down to Louisville and other areas. That was only possible because of the application, number one, of the staff to the board on their expertise on what was needed to be able to accomplish what we needed to do for the town. And so, because we all agreed that there was a shortfall of RTD not being able to provide access that everybody's talking about, despite the taxes that we've given to them. So we were able to accomplish that, and we all showed up for that. And there was, I think, 4 members, that were on the board that probably. And at the end of the day, it passed. And so people are starting to look at Erie as a model of how we can work together, both on the board and staff over the last number of years. And I think that's something that is because of our ability to work together to accomplish despite political stuff.
So using TNAC as an example, where we talked about whether or not to raise the rate or not. We're very aware of the implications of spending more money. And so one of the questions is, and you, from talking to residents, you may have answers. What is the risk to the charter of putting it in as a core part of the charter versus as a separate line item, if you will? that would be voted on independently?
The pay increases for
Yes.
support.
Because I think we're all in favor of it.
I think you need to characterize the why. And I think on the last meeting, it might have been you that said, you know, the town doesn't have, because I think it was like $100,000 maybe in total. Like if the town doesn't have $100,000 to compensate for legislative support, then we got bigger problems. Our town budget's about 200 million a year, I think, something like that. 100 million?
Yeah.
Oh, 100 million plus 100 million in enterprise. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a
General fund's about 30 million.
it's a big responsibility that we have. And so I think if you express what we do for that compensation and why it's important in a concise way, I think voters will support it. I think what we learned with TNAC is that we were concerned that the tax rate increase would have killed the TNAC ballot measure. But at the rate it got approved, I think we were wrong. I think that voters would have supported it. But we were just conservative in terms of, you know, I would like to think this board, we're actually fiscally conservative. We scrutinize where money goes and we try to make sure there's a good return on investment. And so I think if you explain what the return is to voters and you compare what we're looking, or what you're looking, I should say, to set as compensation for the board, if you compare it to the region, you know, it's not a topic that's not discussed everywhere. When I go to the Metro Mayor's Caucus, it's a topic. Other mayors are like, oh, well, how much are you getting? How much are you getting? You know, and it's not because we want more, but it's just like, you know, hey, we're all here on a Monday, you know, spending 6 hours meeting with one another to talk about things that we can bring back to our constituents. It's extremely valuable. But we're all doing it out of the love. It's not for the money. But every politician is afraid to ask for the compensation because it seems self-serving and it seems greedy. And I don't know about everyone else, but you know, $1,000 a month and $1,500 a month is not going to change my life. But it does express value for the time that we put in.
Regarding TNAC, in terms of that question, to the mayor's point, that we all had that discussion about, and we had, again, focus on our staff that has a lot of expertise in this area in terms of what the return on investment is. And I think in intellectual terms, I think we all agreed that the desire to increase it would have made more sense from a value perspective of what it was going to cover. And I think that's the big thing is the why, is what that brings, and also from an operational perspective in the future, that it tells you you're actually saving money by doing that. But we felt because of what we've heard.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to get into discussion with Tina.
No.
Yeah.
I think for your charter, if there is a narrative that goes along with the charter that expresses the why in some of the sections, that'll help the layperson go, okay, that makes sense. As opposed to, you know, I'm an engineer, I read requirements documents all the time, they're very dry. If I read requirements documents alone, like, okay, I don't know why they wrote it this way, but if there's a narrative that goes along with it that says, this is why this is important, I think people can resonate with the logic behind it.
And to that point, like if you consider equity, and Mayor Pro Tem Laughlin touched on it, that, you know, being a woman and a mother and a, you know, full-time job, understanding that, you know, that like I don't show up in the community because I have flexibility to do that. There are costs to that. My family is the one that paid the price, as all of our families are doing right now this morning on a Saturday morning. But if you can center that equity piece of, you know, we recognize that this is a harder burden for some to carry, and that eliminates the possibility for them to show up at these tables. One thing I remember is hearing from Old Town residents, and I appreciate that we have Old Town representation, but they didn't have the ability to necessarily run for office because it's so expensive. And so just even running was not an option. And then being able to show up to these tables and commit the time, you know, that was a piece. So that's just something that has occurred to me, is that centering equity might be.
So-
Well, and I wanna throw a perspective out there, because I just did a little napkin math. When you figure that, you know, again, a trustee, what a trustee is.
That. I just got all the that instead of that.
Well, so this is my napkin math, this is my mom math, okay? So when you figure that. You know, about $370 a month is, you know, the take home after taxes. That covers about 33 hours worth of a low on the scale babysitter. I have a girl in my neighborhood who's putting out 15, or who is sitting for $15 an hour. She was 18, so I didn't have the worries about being out past 11, you know, 10:30, 11. Because that's what you pay for a sitter. And that doesn't count, what that doesn't count. So that covers the core meetings as well as about once a week at 2 to 2.5 hours. What that doesn't count is providing, making sure there's pizza coming to the house for the sitter. It doesn't figure in, you know, gas time driving across town if your sitter lives on the other side of town. And so just a brief perspective, I mean.
And I think to speak for all the commissioners that we're in favor of an increase. I'm just trying to figure out what is going on.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things for you guys, and I don't know the answer to this. One is I would say, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I would look at what is written in other charters, because I don't know if that's common to have that in the charter. What's that?
A lot of charters and ordinance, the town
Okay.
trustees would be setting.
Yeah, and so that's something that I remember having a conversation with Commissioner Hayden back when he was on the board of trustees, and we spoke about this. And it is a difficult thing to vote on, but to me, like that, I've always hated that excuse, because there's a lot of difficult things you have to vote on. It's just, it's part of the job. I think one of the funny things with having this conversation is I happened to read an article about some of the stuff that's going on in Dacono now, and apparently one of the things that caused a lot of the turmoil in there was what they wanted to raise the rates for their city council. And I was looking at what they wanted to raise it to, and I'm like, that's what we're making right now.
They put it on the
So,
ballot.
yeah, and so it's all perspective. I think, to Mayor Brooks's point, I think people around here are probably more willing to give more, and I think that from a budget perspective, it's fine. I think for you all, it's just finding that line between what is reasonable, and I think if people think it's reasonable, they will vote for it. If it's too large, then that could be a hot button issue, but I doubt it. But I mean, you know, so there's not an easy answer to it. But I mean, if you want my personal opinion, I would say for trustee somewhere between 500 and 800, and probably for mayor somewhere between 750 and 1,000, somewhere in there. I mean, it should be more than it is now, but you know, it's finding that balance point. And I would just compare to our neighbors around us, and realizing that we're not Broomfield, we're not Longmont, but we're more than 10,000 bigger than Louisville. We're way bigger than Firestone or Frederick. So somewhere in that vicinity, I would say is probably reasonable. Yeah. So
How close are we to the Broomfield population?
we're half.
Can I make a request that publicity, or whatever you want to call it, is something we discuss?
Yeah,
I thought it was on the list.
it is. So I think, like,
As far as what we've discussed so far, do any of the commissioners have any one questions or any requests for additional detail? I know we got a lot.
I know you said you had to leave at 10.
Yeah, I got a hard stop here unfortunately, so.
So if we wanted to get any questions from trustee Bell, just rapid fire at me.
Yes, you know, answers, that's it.
The lightning round, Bill.
I guess just in general, then your thoughts on the layout and the form of the charter. As
Yeah, I just say I've been watching the meetings on YouTube. I think you guys have done a very good job of and I think your attorney in the meeting was talking about, the well-written charter has only what it needs in it and nothing more. And I think you guys have done a good job of navigating that, like, and just between all of you, I think you've done a good job, like, on those things where should it be in, should it be in, you've all listened to each other and you've all I don't think there are any hot button issues that when it comes to coming before the voters, like, this is one of the things that you don't want any real controversial headline things that somebody's going to make a big deal out of. If it's a charter that reads like most of the charters in the area, it's probably going to pass. So I've heard stories about why when we went through this, like, I think it was in the early 90s that they tried to do this, and it's a very different town than it is back then, and there's a lot of different demographics of people that are here. So I think people understand that based on the size that we are, that this is probably the right route we should be going. But so as long as you guys keep navigating that path, I think you're in good shape. So there's nothing really that I did want to say one thing about because I think as it relates to us with, I know you're talking about some of the transition things and it sounds like you guys had settled on 24 being a new, which I can appreciate, because I was curious about that, because is one of the three that would be up in April of 2024, like if we get extended. And I know you guys are talking odd year elections, and I was thinking, okay, November 2025, like, am I up for that? And so like I would have no questions going to November of 2024. That's doable. I like so for myself, it's a matter of I was going to make a decision at the end of the year to what I want to do, if I want to run again or not, and so I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem and Trustee Harrison are probably going through the same exercise too. So as far as transitional periods, and I know there was discussion for you guys about Trustee Sowish and Trustee Bearer on if they go up again, and I think one of the things, like, and I don't know what the right answer to this is, but because you guys are proposing districts, it's hard to know, like, until the districts are defined, what that's going to look like. Because one of the things that I was just thinking about, there's a very good chance, I mean Trustee Hoback and I will definitely be in the same district, and there's a good chance that you could be in the same district with us. You two will definitely be in the same district, and there's a good chance Trustee Harrison could be in the same district. So if you're in 3 districts, so then if you have all new elections, I guess that would solve that issue. If you have transitional, there could be a potential that there's a district that would not have representation, or I don't know what that would look like, or would, I guess maybe there would be turnover in one. So those are, I don't have a good answer for you. I just, like, I do think, and I know Mr. Fleming had sent out an email about, hopefully you don't have to train all new people. I'm sure some of us will run again, but yeah, just thinking about those kind of things, because there definitely should be some sort of, I will just say, as I was saying before, that for myself, when I came on, there's about a 6-month period where you're really learning the ropes, and before you really feel like you're hitting your stride, so, and with all the new things that will be in place as far as some of the powers we'll have as home rule, that I'm sure that'll be an extra step in that, so.
I think that when it comes to the districts, everybody has their opinion. What I would say is guide your, how you design it. Is what are your best practices? What are your intentions? What is it that what are your criteria that you are going to lay out? Or as Mayor has said, mentioned before, I'm in the IT space, we deal with requirements documents all the time. And to be very clear, but
So we've been following
Yeah.
best practices.
yeah, I think from a requirements perspective is to be very clear about what is it, how do you give voice to everybody?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Very good.
And the chair, and in terms of trying to ensure that the process of election that the funding mechanism for that doesn't become cost prohibitive, but also there are voices that you mentioned earlier that may not be able to have the income or the network of people to be able to run, but yet their voice and what they bring to the table is very valuable. And so I think that's key to that. So from a district perspective, again, you look at the federal side, California has 2 senators, like every other state. Yet they have twice or 3 times the population as other states as you guys have. So I think
The population size, something in that balance is.
yeah,
One thing that I'm curious about, and I'm sometimes surprised when we put out calls for people to either be on boards and commissions, or even when the elections are coming up, there are few people who really attempt to get in that pool. There were a lot of positions open this last election, so I think there was probably a little more than typical, I would say. But it would be nice if there were a clause where if a district does not get any candidate, that position could be filled at large. Because I think that could happen where you could have, maybe nobody in the north, if you have a north district, I don't know how you're gonna draw the lines, but if you have a north district, because there's gonna be 2,000 houses built along 52, which I think that's probably an underestimation. There might not be interested parties up there yet. And so you might have a situation where you might get one, but you might get 0. And if you get 0, what do you do?
well, it has to be based on population for the district, correct?
Well, but one of the things, are we using like,
And just the point is, what happens?
That's a
if-
good point.
What
That's a very
if
good point.
nobody?
And that was one of my concerns, was that what happens,
I mean,
but based off of what you were saying, Mayor Protem, coming in with things that you're hearing from other residents, that really solidifies the need for districts.
Yep.
In my opinion, so I mean, we don't need to get into like the ins and outs of the charter and things like that, but
That's a great idea.
that's such a good point. And that was one thing that I was really concerned about, is what if we don't get any candidates?
So you should. I would suggest that you try to have representatives from all districts. But in the instance where you get no one from the district that gets enough signatures, maybe those who satisfy the number of signatures in the rest of the area just become at-large candidates, and then the voters decide. Just an idea.
We have to look into that, because it was something we thought about.
You need a disaster scenario.
Yeah.
Denver has an advice system for their council. We talked about a hybrid, I'm sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
We did talk about a hybrid, but then filling vacancies becomes very.
What's two per district is awesome. I think that, 3 districts, 2 per district, that's an awesome construct. I like it. I just think you need you need an augmentation of what happens if you only, what if you only get one candidate in the district, or, and you need two? Because we're all gonna have to run again, so,
Yeah, especially the first one.
yeah, exactly.
After that, it'll be easier because we want to stagger, but the first one.
Yep.
might
Does-
cause issues.
Does it make sense to, I mean, and I don't know what I can imagine, I don't know what the cost would necessarily be. I know Broomfield has a council of 10. With the mayor being a tie-breaking vote. I often think about Longmont, which has districts, and then they have a couple of large seats.
Yeah.
And is Longmont 9?
I felt like 6.
Uh,
7.
7, okay.
I'm actually in the
I
middle.
think as we,
Given our growth, I wonder if,
I think as we grow, I think having a ballot measure in the future to add seats or districts, I think that's
That's kind of
plausible. Well, so for those who don't know, the trustee, we talk about this a lot, the commissioner, you guys might not. 70,000 people in 2035 is built out. That's what we think Erie will get to.
2045, so that's gonna be quick if it's 2030.
45, okay, thank you, sorry. So we want to get to 12% affordable housing by 35,
Yeah.
70,000 people by 45. And so that's double the size we are now. By comparison, Longmont just passed Boulder in population. They're about 120,000 people in Longmont. Boulder's kind of restricted at about 110-ish thousand people. So if you think about the size of those two towns, we're gonna be nearly that size. We're just as big as Castle Rock, we're just as big as like Lakewood, I think. We're bigger than Golden already. So yeah, I think having voters be able, don't feel like you have to give the 2045 answer in this chart.
I think one of the big focuses we are putting on is like, what do we need now? And giving the tools for the future.
Yeah.
rather than-
Amber, you were gonna say something more about Longmont, I think so.
I do think the combination of, like, I guess my one piece of feedback, and I've been mulling this over for a little bit. I love the district idea, but I also think representation from 1 or 2 at-large folks is probably not a bad idea. Because I do think, I just think there's a lot of value in having, yes, the districts to make sure everybody's represented, but then also a couple of folks who are running at large.
Yeah, that actually would make sense if you're talking about what happens if nobody runs in a district. Then you can pull somebody at large, because if you're saying, well, the next highest vote getter, well, they're only being voted on in one specific district, and that doesn't really allow for that, so.
I would do it before you set the ballot. I would say that when everyone turns in their
Petitions.
petitions to be on the ballot, if a district doesn't get enough candidates, then the town clerk's office would determine whether somebody else in the field becomes at-large candidates.
Yeah, no, I've seen some charters where they have a split of districts and at large, and you have to declare if you're going at large or district.
Get difference like
Yeah.
that.
So, but yeah, I think that's because I do have that concern as well. That was brought up where what happens if no one runs in that district? And you can't really just pull from another district. And then you're just dealing with pure appointments where you say, well, we're gonna have a special election immediately after we just had that election, which
As it's written now, I think would be the result, because if no one runs, no one gets elected, there's a vacancy.
Yep.
The process we have is next highest vote getter, no one ran, so there's no next highest vote getter, so you go to a special election.
Yeah, which is silly.
I agree.
Work out vacancies become a lot more complex.
Yeah.
When you have a combination.
Yeah, and also regarding that as well, so what happens if the districts get redrawn? And I know it doesn't vacate the individual, like they still run out their term. But what happens if now they are on a line where now they're in a different district? Are they representing that new district or still representing that old district? Or do they just become at large?
I guess the state. I would say the state guidelines there are really helpful, especially for the Colorado State Senate redistricting. Because it does a couple things. One, keeping interest groups together. And I don't know if folks have been watching the Weld County thing, but, or the Weld County redistricting, but in watching that, like. How is it that Greeley is all of a sudden drawn into 3 different county commission districts, right? Like, so keeping like areas of interest in a district. Also things like minimizing when we do redraw boundary lines, and there's language in state statute about this. When lines get redrawn, it's to the least, like redrawing them to the effect that you draw the fewest possible number of like state senators into like a new district together.
Yeah, I think it's the Constitution that directs it and statute expand upon that, but I
Right.
think you guys have gone pretty in depth on that a little bit.
So I think
I bet you have more than 45 minutes of other topics.
I mean, he kind of covered a few of the others just in the
Good.
course of the discussion, but. As far as like some of the big, any other commissioners have any other follow-ons or specific questions on anything we've heard so far? I know one of the other things we wanted to ask about, like, and Trustee Bell touched on it, is we'd be asking some of you to extend your terms, and just a quick answer, would you be willing to carry through?
My term's only 2 years, so sure.
Yeah, you get 33%.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that there needs to be a transition period if people who are experienced, you can keep things moving along. So I'm perfectly fine with that. It is helpful.
Yeah, you're not up for. You're not for, you have 2026, right?
Yeah, so.
Well, everybody's up for election.
The only thing I really looked at is Malcolm's email. With the examples, and I'm fine with that, I agree, there should be a transition area, or transition period, if you dissolve the board and everyone is all, it would be, this has been like drinking from a fire hydrant for me, and that's just. Me personally, but yeah, there's so much to learn and get in front of. So.
Stability is important. And I think that's another thing is that where there may be people out, residents out there, oh, you're trying to extend your time. No, it's about trying to keep some semblance of stability, goes with your requirements. Why?
Yeah, and from
American.
staff perspective, it's so much work.
To create new relationships.
Yeah.
Correct. Let's do it back.
Yeah, I echo what. For 6 months, and I was only on for 2 years anyways.
Yeah, that's right. You'd be up in this. And then you are 2026.
So yeah, for us, it'd be potentially April to November, so additional 6 months, right?
Yeah.
We have it written in our charter that the new council would start in January. So if November won't be.
Yeah, that's true.
Would be
So,
over December.
so maybe I'm misunderstanding. Let me ask a clarifying question. So the home rule charter question will go on the ballot in November 2023. And if it's voted affirmative, the next election of trustees would be in November of 24.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
the new council
So
would
basically,
be-
And,
But they
that
wouldn't
will-
take
but that will
seats
be
until
all
January.
7 positions.
Well, that's
well,
what
that's how it's written now.
that's what we're debating.
Okay, okay.
Because like, yeah, for Malcolm's email and, you know, what we've heard about
I
continuity.
didn't think you had a choice to like not.
We can,
We
we
can-
can, some of the other charters have basically said, you know, current council or current trustees will continue through and become the town council.
Mhm.
And just go follow or like,
Mhm.
serve on their terms.
I know that you guys are still working on that transition, but I might recommend looking at the Windsor charter, because they specifically towards the district side, they said, okay, first, we're gonna go at those representative districts. That way they can get representation there first and foremost, but they did basically have if, you know, their term was up in this, then it's this, and so on and so forth, so.
That's a lot of what we've done so far.
Yeah, but Windsor, I think Windsor did it pretty well, but of course, I mean, I know you guys have been looking at other charters, but with some of these towns or cities that moved to home rule, a lot of them moved there in the 60s.
Yeah.
And they had so many amendments and revisions to it that you don't have any of those transition procedures or what's the initial was, because it's been amended 3 or 4 times since then. So I know it's, ultimately, whatever you guys dictate in that charter is whatever happens, you know,
Assuming it's voted in.
assuming it's what it is, yes.
I mean, obviously, I can imagine thinking about scale of it.
Yeah, that's kind of, that's why we decided we are not trying to like dictate. Like trigger clauses that take effect sometime in the future, because when that time comes, people will vote on it.
Yeah, I will say though, I know you guys have been trying to look at continuity of government and making it so that it's not a drastic change, but making it so that there's the availability to do something, and a lot of it is saying by ordinance. Personally, when I see the current draft of the transition, that does raise a concern as a resident, because that's continuity of government at that point. And as you know, Trustee Bear said, it was about a year, drinking from the fire hose. Trustee Bell, 6 months. Myself, just there was still more that I had to learn, but the planning commission assisted me. But of course, not everybody has that fortune. So,
And then, Trustee Long, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Lockwood, would you be willing to
Yes,
extend through
yes.
November or January or 25, I guess?
Yes, and I actually really like the idea of moving to a November election. I think we're considering ballot access and you know, voter enfranchisement. That is a key.
Yeah, our highest consideration there was turnout, just looking at even like off-year elections in November, the turnout was abysmal.
Well, and frankly, like spring elections are prohibitive to civic participation.
Yeah, as Denver has been discussing.
Denver, Chicago, every like statutory town in the state of Colorado that has their elections in the spring of even years.
Well, one of the other big things we've been talking about, like, we've been going through, and as we discussed, we say, you know, this would be good to have for a future government, but it's one of those things that we think doesn't really belong in the charter because it's too specific or too, you know, situational and would need to be changed in the future. So we've kind of been tallying up a soft list of things that we would request the council look at passing, or the new council considering it. Yeah. And so we wanted, I guess, kind of your thoughts on that kind of process, or rather than putting everything in the charter, give the tools in the charter and then give suggestions as a charter commission, what you should do with those tools.
I love that idea. And I think Trustee Sawich mentioned earlier, you know, you want to put, or maybe it was Trustee Bell. It came from that seat.
It wasn't me.
You know, you want to put what's absolutely necessary in the charter, but in doing the deconstructive analysis that you're doing, you're going to run across a lot of things that are fodder for amendment or consideration. So yes, I would love a list from you guys of other things you think we should probably address. Speaking for myself.
So to that point, one of the things I noticed fairly quickly in both the Broomfield charter, which I did run a charter amendment on a few years ago, as well as like the Loveland charter. One of the things I like about it is it defers to ordinance and code on things like the role of the planning commission. There's been a lot of conversation about the role of the planning commission. I think I personally really like the lines in state statute that say, or the, you know, or the board or the council may choose, may take on any of the duties or withdraw them as needed for that jurisdiction. And then the other piece I like about it is in the Loveland charter, it talks about regarding boards and commissions, like, you know, the charter says, okay, so please defer to our code and ordinances on that. And then it's, you know, commissioner or appointed committee members and advisory board folks serve at the pleasure of the commission, so, or of the council.
Yeah.
I'll add to that a little bit. This is something we can address in ordinance. I don't think you need to put it in charter, but advisory boards and commissions that have the amount of volume of work like the planning commission. I would actually be a fan of compensating them some for their time. Because they should be doing a lot of due diligence, and reviewing the applications that come before them. And their packets are likely just as large as the, or maybe not just as large, close to what we're getting. Again, not something that needs to be in the charter, but something that needs to be considered.
I don't think anything in the charter says that they can't.
Yeah,
Some of the
you could compensate whoever you want. Yeah.
One of the ways that some of the utility boards handle that, like the, Cooter Electric Co-op. Or Cooter Valley Electric Co-op, one of the things that their board, they do for their board is they don't pay them a salary, but they offer them like a space in their benefits package.
Mhm.
So it's like they provide like a secondary healthcare or whatever.
That's something you guys might not know about either. There have been trustees in the past that either go through a downsizing or something. And one of the benefits that we have as board members is we can purchase at full cost. There's no town share of it, but we can purchase benefits packages through the town.
Yeah.
And so that's great if somebody, if you have that type of impact on your life, or if you choose to do this as a full-time volunteer position, you have the option to at least cover your family for medical. So I think that's something that we don't talk about. And
I do love, Trustee Harrison, will you say that one more time about the rec center?
Yeah, I think one of the possible conversations for trustees was that if you get elected, you have a family membership. Rec center. And so I think that's obviously for the first 2.5 years, that's used by our family. And by many, but it is available.
I was told that when I came to register, they looked at me like, who are you? Right, the first time, and they were like, I don't think anybody's used this.
Yeah, so I think that's, I actually did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened to my wife when she went there.
It does make up for missing all the recitals and stuff. And say, hey, you have one, go ahead, got a membership.
Right.
And also, the thing about it is with all of the boards and commissions that we have. If serving on a charter commission or serving on an open space and trails advisory board or a sustainability advisory board, or the tree board. Like, if those are things where people are kind of serving as ambassadors for our town. Then them having access to the community center as a resource.
Yeah.
And something they can use, I think, is to the town's benefit.
And it's not a huge revenue impactor.
No.
But I think that's something that we can do through ordinance, and I do like this idea.
In the next.
Probably should.
I do like this idea,
Agenda.
and something we'll put it on our to-do list.
And so we collectively say all that to say, yes, absolutely. If you want to give us a list of stuff to consider in ordinance, we absolutely can. There's so much we can do in ordinance.
Yeah.
I'm also puzzled sometimes. We have a very, so when I was appointed to Board of Trustees in December 2 years ago. There were a lot of questions I would ask about things. And I was like, well, can we work on an ordinance to do this? And they're like, well, no, that's something that, is covered by the state statute. So you'd have to either put it on a ballot or cover it in the charter. And so there were probably 5 or 6 issues I thought should have been on the ballot, but weren't, because we were waiting for the charter. We're waiting for home rule charter to be able to summarily sum up a lot of those things. And so looking forward to the home rule charter being done. But I think there are certain things that, we can certainly handle through ordinance. There are certain things we can put on the ballot. And I think if we, personally, I get annoyed when I get a ballot. Only it's like one thing. This is not worth me walking down the street, but I do both. But but yes, we can totally handle these things in ordinance, and we want people to take it seriously, and we want people to invest their time. We don't want people going, well, I'm sorry, my wife wants to go to dinner, so that's a bad example. But I'd rather go to a baseball game, so I'm going to skip the meeting tonight. We want people to make it a priority. But my wife would trump all all this, sorry.
And I know we had the question about it's not really marketing, but kind of discussion around like public awareness. Malcolm, did you have a chance to find out what our cutoff is for?
I have not. I'm pretty certain, because we had this conversation around TMAC at home, that the restriction is you cannot invest town dollars in campaigning for a ballot measure or advocating for a ballot measure other than answering unsolicited questions once the ballot language has been drafted, which is pretty close to the election. I don't think we drafted ballot language for home rule commission or TMAC until like late August, maybe. Yes. So up until that point, we could have been doing a full court press on why is this a good idea? Why do we endorse it? Any of that. TMAC did a great job of really pushing to the public why. And the home rule charter is one from May until we draft language in about August. I think we can and should explain why. Do interviews, put together narratives.
And I think
Do a comparison to other towns to say, hey, here's why this works other places, or here's why it doesn't work other places. Like whatever you need to do to be able to express your thought process after May.
one of the things we had kind of discussed was how we would present this to you.
Mhm.
And it would just, rather than the text of it in a reading to you guys.
Please don't do that.
It was more like we wanted to do a PowerPoint presentation where we would come before you and present our findings and our to-do list for, afterwards. And so I thought also that could be used as kind of just like a general knowledge thing.
I think if you were to put that, if part of the advantage and the goal should be to public education for our residents. So I would suggest if the rest of the board think it's a good idea, like others that come before us in our staff, is to have a routine monthly or bi-monthly or something, or whatever it is, every other month update that can be presented, recorded, so that everybody in the town can see what you're currently working on, your status updated.
Yeah.
And for anyone who has like Comcast, we've got an undivided audience. And we have a channel where you can put whatever you want on it.
Well, and I've been working with Gabby, so on our actual home rule commission page, I've been sending her the summaries of each.
Yeah.
Which
Whichever age. Yeah, okay, very.
There's a question about what the commissioners could do after.
Yeah, and I think that's what we wanted to make sure for Malcolm, that like, what is our ability to actually speak about the charter as, former commissioners rather than just as citizens, and whether we can.
Even if it becomes, I'm sorry, I'm not going to jump in and answer a question directed to you, but even if it becomes May, here, Board of Trustees, here is the home rule charter. There is nothing that prevents the Board of Trustees from leveraging the public and being able to have you participate in conversation and assist us in our duties. So I don't think there's any legal precedent that would prevent you from participating. Now, you may not be able to convene a meeting any longer. You may not, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but if you have something to share that will help your work product be acceptable to our voters, you've got our support.
One thing that would be great is if there could be a road show or whatever, like goes around, to make sure everybody knows what this is really about, because even still, we've been meeting for months, and I run into people constantly that still have no idea what's going on. I did something here into the seniors. I gave a presentation, and there were a lot of people who didn't know any idea.
It's dry content. And are people's lives going to change because of the home rule charter? Probably not. More than likely not.
Yeah, I think in this, again, where I talked about earlier, we have a meeting staff. And Gabby from the engagement and communication side of things has been in place to be able to reach out to those organizations, whether senior citizens, because they tend to be the most active as we have seen pickleball. Yes. It's come up and laying outside at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I think they're the most passionate on dedicated to that. For those who are working families that may not be, but go to where they are. Set up at soccer games, have farmers market.
If the town hosts an event, you have the right as a presenting sponsor to use the time. Say whatever you want.
Is there a statute for ballot language that's?
Yeah, we do the actually like
Probably not, what we've done.
that.
Yes, I think it did say, well, it said you have to submit a charter within 180 days.
Yes.
And are you, when are you,
20 of the state constitution.
when are you actually done?
I think that's, if our only purpose was to write the charter and present it, I would assume that once we present that, so.
That may be the case, but we still have your phone numbers. So I think that again, we'll consult with our legal counsel to double check this. But I believe until the charter is put on the ballot, it is our prerogative to evaluate and advocate for what we believe to be the desire of.
Yeah, we wanted to confirm from the legal perspective that was allowed.
Yeah, because one thing that really surprised me is I went to our HOA and said, using your mailing list, could you send something out about home rule so people would come to the commission with any questions? And they refused.
Our neighborhood,
It's
our
subjective.
HOA president does not believe that they're allowed to even talk about home rule.
Yeah, it's subjective. I think that, depending on, if your community is managed by MSI or some other group, partisan politics, is an issue. Things that favor a particular candidate or issue is an issue, but engagement.
This was
And
just
So
hear people to talk to.
Yeah.
And what questions do you have, so we can publicize, so we know, again, outreach.
But we can't give legal advice to HOAs, unfortunately, so that's kind of where, like, how do you get people to get the message? And how do you get people to care?
Cecil, I know that you have a lot of engagement with the HOAs, the one committee.
We actually, the one committee is now being transferred to the Parks and Rec Department, their new neighborhood services division. And we did a lot of outreach prior to putting the commission on the ballot, but as many of you may know, the town and town employees, we cannot do anything. And once you all, I think Malcolm can correct me if I'm wrong, but once you all do the resolution to put the charter on the ballot, all you can do is do a resolution as the trustees, you can do a resolution in support of it.
Yeah, but until there's 3 months between those two periods.
We will have the resolution on, I believe it's May, because we have to have the resolution to call a special election so many days before the election. So we have to get it in front of you and get the ballot language written.
In May?
It's May or June. I don't recall. We'll work with Hillary on that.
Yes. Yeah,
So-
I guess I thought you would draft the charter and give, and I could be totally wrong here, because I've never done this before. None of us have. I thought they would draft the charter, submit it to the Board of Trustees. And then it wouldn't get put on the ballot until November.
Well, it doesn't, but the board has to pass a resolution to hold the special election and put the ballot language on the charter.
So if it's like the same thing that we had when we put this to November vote before, we held the vote to have a ballot measure for home rule and TNAC.
I guess.
No, we had it like in June,
Right,
July.
right, they're
And then we had a separate one for ballot language.
right.
Between those two, we
Yep.
could totally be.
The home rule, and that's why we have Hillary as our special
Sure,
counsel,
sure, sure.
because
Yeah.
home rule has some very specific statutes that we have to follow.
Okay,
Specific number of days, and so I think that's the question going to Hillary.
okay,
We know we have, this commission has to present their proposed charter to you before May sixth.
okay.
That's a hard deadline.
If you can already share that with Kendra and others that we're on the same page.
Well,
Yeah.
we're, yeah. we
They're
have-
both on vacation.
Yeah, they're both,
Yeah.
but Hillary,
Just the goal of making sure we're on.
yeah, Hillary actually works for Kendra.
Yeah,
so.
and I know it's very prescriptive. Within 30 days, we have to do a public notice for the election.
Thank you.
60 days later, we have to provide notice of the ballot title, but this is not if we decide to, we will. So by the way, for all the home rule commissioners here, statute says that your commission is dissolved once it is either passed or rejected for a second time.
Oh, where did you find that? I kept looking for it.
Long time.
Looking for it on Thursday night, could not find it.
It's CRS 312207.
2207, thank you. I was looking.
So 312207.
Yep, so basically, if the majority of the registered electors or voters voting therein vote to reject, so this is the second time the revised proposed charter, the charter commission shall forthwith be dissolved. So if it passes, you're dissolved. If it is rejected for a second time, then you're dissolved. Okay. So thanks for at least November of maximum November of next year.
So if it goes to a vote in November, do they get 180 days to draft the second one?
If it goes November and it's rejected, they start back again 180 days.
Okay.
We go through the same exact process. But they only get two, if that's the case, they only get a second chance, and then they dissolve it and a new initiative has to start up for the home rule charter. So
All right.
Pretty good. Pretty good chances.
yeah, so, but
Please
Malcolm,
vote yes.
I was gonna ask the same question, to reach out to Kendra and Hillary about what can we do, because this isn't we are going to be put a ballot initiative that is, for the town that's new, and we have to set the ballot language. This is we will, and the ballot language is already set.
Well, that's a valid question, not language.
Well,
So-
the language is set in statute. It says exactly prescriptive on what it has to say. So, yeah.
I
Well,
think
that's the
that's,
question, I guess.
yeah, we just don't have enough information, so we need to
Yeah.
find out.
Do we need to start an information campaign now?
Yes.
Because we can.
Can we? That's also the question.
Because there is no ballot language drafted, so yes, we can, we could be justifying that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We don't technically draft anything. It's drafted for us in statute.
Okay, so I'll have an opinion on our charter.
Yeah,
You say, yes, it goes on the ballot. Thank you for your
But,
service.
we rubber stamp it.
Well,
We're required to.
we do have to submit that language to the counties to put on the ballot, so we do.
Right, it's just whatever that language is set.
Yeah, so
The board of trustees can adopt a resolution in favor of
Yes.
any issues.
We can.
Or opposition.
Before we wrap up, then, we've got 15 minutes. I think that was all we had discussed during our last meeting as a commission, what we wanted information on. Was there anything else you guys wanted that came up since Thursday? Which one did we discuss or talk about from the commission?
Where'd you guys settle with, I've seen that there've been several testimonies before you. Related to planning commission details, where'd you settle on what to put in the charter? Is it
Just the
just that there
basis.
will be, okay, which I think is appropriate, everything else is more appropriate for
You know, basically, we had that extended session with
Okay.
the planning commission and town staff, and looked at it, and their unanimous recommendation was just let it set by ordinance because specifics.
Would you like to run down your list of ordinance ideas you have for us, and we can?
I don't think we have.
Oh, you don't have to?
We've just been like running through as we get to a point, it's like, well, we don't want to put this in the charter until the commission, or we can put it in our list of recommendations for the new council.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if some of the items that you have in there, like, you know, campaign finances, code of conduct and ethics, obviously. For the body that is actually providing that ordinance based on, you know, the charter. What the intentions are, what you had in mind of what exactly you want to see in that, or if it's just whatever you guys feel is best. Because I know it says by ordinance, we have to have a campaign finance regulations, code of conduct and ethics, specifically those two. And right now, I know we follow the state for campaign finances. We have a small portion of the code of ethics, but is there a wider breadth or a brevity that you want to it?
I think
Or
at least the campaign finance one, we kind of built it, we built into it what the intention was. And like for code of conduct and ethics, it's
I think
yeah.
it would not be a bad idea, I don't think, to have sedition and treason added to like the list of things that would disqualify someone from being elected official.
I think that's felony, and that's covered.
It doesn't say felony.
Oh, right. Right. 'Cause
And I-
Colorado
and-
specifically.
And personally, I don't think that a felony
Yeah.
should be a disqualifier for someone who's allowed to be a voter.
I think if you follow Colorado, like the Colorado Constitution on that, that allows for. You know, if they're a qualified voter, they simply must have served, and if they're a convicted felon, they simply must have served all of their sentence.
And also, I'll to clarify for those who may not be aware, a felony is just any crime that could have a penalty of greater than a year and a day. So that could be a lot of stuff. It's not always, you know. Murder is a felony, yes, but it could also be like, you know. Mail fraud, if you mail a false document or something like that, it's a pretty low bar.
there's also in regards to that, there's I forget if it's breach of fiduciary responsibility or breach of public trust, but one of those. You're precluded from being able to ever hold office in the state of Colorado, and I don't know if that is one that you have in there. I don't believe I saw that. B, if that's a felony or a class of misdemeanor. And see if we don't have that specifically in there, does it make it so that that isn't applicable to the town anymore?
I don't know if you're eligible to vote in Colorado if you're convicted of those.
Yeah, we have the eligible to vote in Colorado, it's part of the requirement.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, if they can still vote, then
Yeah, and I think you can still vote, but you can't hold office. That
Right
it's
now,
one of those. Yeah,
Colorado statute, I thought we also said.
our restrictions are pretty much financial crimes and eligibility to vote.
Sure, you line yourself with the state to that, because if you have any issue in that, always remember that if a lawsuit is filed, is town most likely to have to pay expenses for defending or whoever some things. So it's just something to take into account. So it is already there and we're proven. Reasonable life.
Yeah, right now it's very simple. Citizen of the US, registered elector of the town, resident of the town for no less than 12 months consecutive. 12 consecutive months preceding the election. And in the district that you are running for, and then currently eligible to vote in Colorado general elections.
And also, I would say, in light of recent events, which happened in our neighboring communities, that somebody who ran for office then moved to outside the community,
Yeah,
was still in that seat and did not give up that seat according to law.
no, that's an automatic disqualifier. You have to, once you are no longer
In your district.
in your district, you
Correct.
you are.
They were giving the question about whether she was. Yeah. So, I think she had even moved outside.
Actually, yeah, we do have a list of named offenses that would.
Yeah, named convictions, general financial and perjury.
Yeah, financial perjury.
So One thing that, again, I wanted to address, as soon as I was appointed and was, so we have to wait for the charter, was campaign finance. You mentioned it. Where is it in your? 204?
Yes.
Oh, it's past it.
Page 6.
Yeah, it's very early on.
That's what we were very concerned about.
Yeah, basically, we say that you shall require this wording. Adopt and maintain ordinance by local campaign finance regulating that address matters covered by state
So
constitution.
that would be in the list of things we should address in one.
Yeah, and it would be like, we give you the goal there, to require timely disclosure of campaign contributions and spending.
And so since we're gonna go to a coordinated election, I believe we're gonna use census tracer, yeah, which is much better than, or much more detailed than what we have. And they do levy fines if you make a mistake on it. We could do it. We don't use tracer today.
No, but we levy fines.
Yes, well,
Yes, we had.
Yeah.
So today, there's like absolutely no limit on contributions to elected officials here in town, and when I talk to my peers in other areas, their mouths just drop like, what?
That's because we're statutory. And I know.
And the trend of the state is to push things to local decision making, and so they intentionally don't get involved in statutory municipal elections, which leaves us vulnerable to exploitation. And I think we need to close that loophole immediately.
And Jennifer Parenti says she was gonna do something about that.
She's trying, but she has to get a lot of votes. Yeah.
So, yeah, along those lines, I was thinking about, there's nothing in here about, and I'm wondering if this does make sense, is something regarding records preservation.
So we're preservation.
Records preservation regarding campaign finance.
Oh.
Currently, we maintain them for a year.
And then after, if we're elected, they have to maintain it for a certain amount of time as well.
So in regards to the ordinances that you'll request the board to consider. Have you lined out what board will consider it? Will it be
It would have to be after the passage, because I think the way we've written it, after passage of the charter, once that election is certified, you guys become the council. And that's it, and you have all the powers afforded by the charter there.
If you give us a list of like things that you think we should take up in ordinance, there's theoretically, we could start working on them now, right?
As long as they're allowed.
Yeah.
As long as it's not, yeah.
But if it's like, hey, like, for example, campaign finance, I was hoping you guys would be able to address this, but if the answer is nope, do that in ordinance, okay, well, we'll start on an ordinance.
They discussed it, but there was a lot of like, it would be against kind of the idea of what we've been doing in here to put like specific schedules, and disclosures and like limits and things like that. Specifics we've been trying to leave.
but we can't pass campaign finance ordinance, right?
Right, so those are things, that's what we were saying, those are things that you would have to
Give
take
us the
on
powers.
after the charter.
Yeah, so you'd have to do it after the certification of the November election.
Right.
If it's passed,
So
that's when you would become the
I guess the
council.
question is, would it be the like new home rule after the election where you elect district representatives?
No,
No, that's a whole year later.
Transition.
Yeah, so November 2023, if the charter passes, you guys, and as soon as it's certified, you guys immediately become the council. With all the powers of the charter.
So they'll be trustees.
Yeah.
Be council members.
Oh, okay.
New name
And I thought we
tags.
said we would,
Not me,
get certain things done.
can't be
Yeah,
like.
they have to be. They have to
But
be.
it says town.
Because as soon as they're the council.
We'll still be down.
Says limits, but on the timeframe within. For certain things.
Yeah, some things have to, like the district is a big one that has to be done within 180 days of getting power. But other than that, they can do any of this.
They won't be district representatives. That's part of the transition.
Yeah,
Correct.
and they just, you guys will not be assigned to any districts. You'll just be the new council serving at large until the new council is elected.
Not to take us back too far, but what would you think about having the compensation of the board tied to the AMI of the town.
That's something that I.
Like 0.5%
Because
or 0.75% per month.
Boulder does things where compensation increases on January 1 based off of CPI or something.
Yeah.
And that's. I've brought that up many times.
Yeah, that was one of our initial. That was one of our decisions.
It's creative in the sense that,
AMI is the median income of the town.
yeah, that AMI, I see that.
Yeah, no, yeah, he was
What
thinking
is
CPI.
So API, so
Get out your
I need to Google
definition.
it.
One of those like cost of living.
So AMI is average median income, and for Erie's about $150,000 now. So if you did 0.75% per month for the mayor, it'd be like $1,100. If you did 0.5% for trustees, it'd be like $700-800. So, and that way,
We just take the politics out of it.
it does. And by the way, well, not necessarily, like, we don't, like, the AMI, it fluctuates with the economy. So if you have a recession and AMIs come down, the pay will come down. And one thing that we advocate for is affordable housing. And so we're gonna bring in people that may average down. So our motivation is not to drive the AMI up, but we want to take the politics out of the compensation.
It's an interesting idea.
So I don't,
What we were thinking is set a limit or an initial number and then tie CPI going forward.
Yeah.
Or whatever the town uses for their employees.
yeah. Yeah.
I have
Area CPI.
question, and
Yes,
this may want to wait until Thursday, but I'm looking at Candace specifically because let me be careful as this. One of the biggest concerns you have raised is the folks that the residents you've spoken to have been very cautious about putting numbers for compensation. And the concern you have raised, you and Brian have raised is like, this could potentially keep us from getting the charter passed. So with this possibility of tying to AMI, what would your thoughts be, or would you be willing to maybe go back to the residents you've spoken to?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's worth discussing. I think that Thursday is probably a more appropriate time since we're not trying to do decision making here, and obviously we're missing several members.
Right.
But I think it's a very interesting idea. I think it's more town specific, which might bode well with residents. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth discussing. It's a good idea.
It's a progress plan. Sure. I'm trying to be creative. Like if you go look at the, because Fort Collins just changed their compensation package in January. It is all among the electeds across the state.
That's a significant.
It's like $30,000.
That's 50 actually for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it so that, she can be full-time, honestly. And so it's, what you're gonna see is a trend more towards that across the state. Just because it's more complex and it's more time consuming. But I do not like the compensation of the board being a political football. And so if you can make it tied to a benchmark that's used for decision-making across the town, then that makes sense. That's, if you want to do like, you could tie it to revenue generated, you could tie it to budget efficiency, you could tie it to AMI. If you want to do performance-based metrics, I mean, you can tie it to things like that, as opposed to, hey, give me $1,000 a month and the layman's going on.
How many of you guys take advantage of like any of the other like secondary, tertiary, besides the town, like the rec center membership, or like buy into they're allowed to buy into the benefits and insurance?
Yeah, so I know at least one trustee in the past who did buy the benefits, but it was because they were out of work at the time. If you've been paying attention, I've gained about 40 pounds since being mayor, so I'm not taking advantage of the membership that I do actually have to the rec center, but it's I think we probably have less time to take advantage of something like that.
For me, I mean, I again, it comes down to your own personal thing. So I've taken advantage of, say, the dental.
Simply because my own board insurance didn't cover it adequately for that. And then the town decided to change that, so to a provider that does not, that did not, let's say, not get accepted by everyone, especially mine. And so I've had to change that out, but yeah, I paid the cost.
I guess we're wrapping up. Does the commission have any last minute questions for the trustees?
Chelsea, we haven't heard from you today.
No, I've enjoyed the conversation. I've enjoyed learning from everybody, so I don't have anything to add, other than I definitely support having pay on the charter, setting some kind of baseline for that as opposed to it being a political thing, so.
But it will
I like
become a
this.
political thing for the charter then, so.
Yeah.
That's why you explain in the narrative, like, why is this in the charter and not a separate ballot? And also, you guys talked about this in your last meeting, I heard, having it as an immediate amendment to the charter, let the voters decide.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then express why.
Yeah.
And then there's different rules for that ballot measure, right? So anything that's like not the home rule charter approval, those amendments, you could treat like you would any other ballot measure.
I think they have to, same thing, they have to propose it to us to put on there, so I don't know, that's, again, Kendra and Hillary, yeah.
We,
That would be another question.
in the future, let's pretend that the home rule charter is passed. Without a home rule charter commission existing, the board of trustees can propose ballot measures to modify the charter.
Or referendums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, it's like, maybe
We do it before the charter though.
well, it's at the same time,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, so it's,
Interesting.
I'm a fan of creative solutions that like just take the nonsense out of some of the politics.
So one thing I am wondering about is a childcare stipend. Potentially for council members.
Okay.
Again, the cost of childcare is not insignificant. And I think it could make the prospect of serving on a council or board more accessible.
I feel that even just with our every Thursday and Saturday, like it's so hard.
Right.
It's so hard because my husband's gone a lot of the time. So it's like, who do I trust? You know, follow bedtime routine.
And are they old enough to? be
Yeah,
able to,
and
like,
don't give this one nuts and don't give that one eggs. Here you do, here's the epi, you know, I mean, there's a lot. It's scary.
Even for me, my wife and I have how we get our daughter guidance down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if she's busy working down in Denver on one day, I'm in my meetings Tuesday and Wednesday because I have our meeting and then we have Dr. Cog possibly downtown in Denver. I can't take a nap.
Yeah.
So she's talking about trying to find somebody to take her down.
Yeah.
What a limousine service, there's somebody now who they trust, but that's a big concern. There's a cost that I think people take, and I think ultimate goal now sum up is the desire is to get people on the board that I think are obviously competent. They know they have the best interest in heart. They're intellectually curious. They have critical thinking skills. The quality, they come from area, they come from all different walks of life. They bring their experiences to the table. And they have, and so that whoever composes that after we leave is, you know, they can't feel comfortable that they have people in here that really are trying to continue the legacy of, really trying to do the hard of it that needs to be done for the town and not for any.
Yeah, I will say, like, I think, just thinking in my head, going back as many boards as possible, I think I'm the first board member who doesn't have a kid, which will change in upcoming, but I'm the first board member who hasn't had a kid for at least the past 3 or 4 boards. So really, I mean, it does.
Best place to raise a family.
Yeah. So, you know, as person there, since I know different walks of life, I mean, the availability for individuals to step up and not think, okay, well, who's gonna watch the kids on Tuesday nights when I'm there for 7 hours?
Right, and
That's
it's not just that though, it's like, are they old, it's not just the like, who I trust, it's like, are they old enough to be
Yeah.
there?
Are they capable if
Are
there's
they
an emergency?
Right, I mean, I'm not gonna go to that 14-year-old kid next door
Yeah.
to watch my kid from 6 to 11.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday night,
I have sent pizzas home from the board meeting.
right?
20-year-old daughter who is certified in a whole bunch of stuff and actually is a para. So I will send all of you guys.
Child care center.
That's a one.
Different conversation.
Different conversation.
Yes.
Sorry.
Can I, if it would be awesome if we could pin down the date of the meeting when the Charter Commission will present to the Board of Trustees. Our options are Thursday, April 27th, or Tuesday, May 2nd.
Yes, the options were at our final meeting within the schedule, which was that April 27th date, or at your first meeting in May, which was supposed to be just like a study session, or
I don't think that was even on the agenda.
it's not even on your agenda, so like May 2nd, that's our Tuesday.
It's a URA, but there's no,
Thursday.
nothing on the
So
URA.
like
right now.
either Thursday, April 27th, or Tuesday, May 2nd, the Board of Trustees.
April 27th works for me, and May 2nd, choose that way.
Isn't that the one where your kids are singing?
Yes,
Second?
our kids, your daughter too, is singing at the Rockies game that night.
Yes, you can't make me sad.
I mean,
Thanks for the heads up, right?
Yeah, I'll be out of the country in the 22nd.
Yeah, I was watching you guys on YouTube and I'm like, no.
That's too far.
Yesterday.
I live my life the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, so April 27th,
That worked.
that seems to work. I don't think we had any.
Chelsea can make.
Oh.
But we're not
But
gonna,
there's people who can't make
I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
mean,
there's any way all of
yeah.
you, we can get all the trustees
Yeah.
and everybody on the one, so
I think
Whatever
April
works
27th,
for
I mean, I have my daughter at the take to soccer break. She was a great example. 30 to 6 o'clock. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think if I can get back. that would be fine.
as long as we have a quorum of the trustees.
Yeah.
It will be
Would it,
successful.
I'll be late.
would it help, would it help attendance if it were virtual or hybrid?
We can make.
Or if we had I think hybrid, if we have a virtual option, I think that could
Yes.
help.
It's very difficult for the audio visual team, for the communications team, if we have more than one person who is that correct?
It's a lot more effort to switch between multiple people on screens and multiple people in the room. It can be done and we will do it if we have to. It is just a lot more effort.
Or just a dial-in maybe, so that they could get audio.
Well, that's like, if you're gonna just be in there watching and you're just gonna do like vote, great. If there's discussion, that's a lot of.
It
keeping track
shouldn't
of.
be a discussion, because it should just be our final presentation.
Yeah.
Whoever's presenting will be the one speaking, and then the
Very much.
trustees have to say yes.
There isn't even a.
That's a very.
Yes, we do not have, we do not have the option to give you red lines in that meeting, so
Right.
I am.
What time would the meeting be on a?
We would do a 6:30 start.
Okay.
Chelsea, would you be able to attend virtually for that, or you're completely
Can't
out?
make a promise. I can try. I'll be in Amsterdam on vacation, so.
Request.
Hey.
Hey, they're all like that.
And I agree for Brian.
There's- Coffee shop.
Yeah.
He's a maybe on the 27th.
Okay.
It'll also be like 4:30.
Oh, true.
I think the option of coming virtual would be beneficial for me just with childcare, because both days are complicated. The second is for sure out,
Yeah.
27th, it's,
Because I think.
I don't know.
I don't think we need full attendance from the commission, because it's just gonna be a presentation.
Right.
It'll be
You,
me, I guess.
right?
So just you will be there. We'll all be virtual.
I'll be in an empty room.
Yes.
Is this gonna be the public hearing?
No,
No,
that's, this is the final presentation.
Got
Is it supposed to be a board meeting, so that
It is.
Yes.
trustees will actually be running the
Can-
meeting?
Yeah.
I had tried to put it on their April 25th agenda as just as a discussion topic, and Kendra indicated that we should do it as a separate meeting because there's a lot of conversation.
Right.
I guess if we could convince, if you all could say that, no, there won't be a lot of conversation. And we can keep it to 30 minutes. I'd have to see what our.
If we had not had this meeting, if we hadn't had an opportunity to discuss like what you've come up with so far, there might be more conversation.
Yeah, I think you've got a good idea as far as the commission, at least what we want to do for that final presentation, and this meeting definitely helped on that. And I mean, there will be opportunity, I guess, after the public hearing for you to provide any sort of actual like private citizen style feedback and public comment and things like that. Are they allowed to provide feedback during the public hearing as well?
During the public hearing, anyone can speak for 3 minutes.
Okay,
That's your, that would be,
That's our-
that your, yeah, that'll be your meeting.
okay.
The meeting to present to them would either be one of their regular meetings or a special meeting of theirs.
Okay.
So,
Or we can submit public comment through the link you guys have.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, you can always do, and you can write as long as.
Well, by that time, there's really no.
We won't be voting.
When we present it to you, it's a final.
Right
It's
now.
basically, here's the charter, like, we would sign it in our previous meeting. We present you the signed charter and say, here's our charter, and then give a presentation, this is what we wanted to do. And then you guys have to accept.
On the 25th. If it's, we've got about 130 minutes on there, it looks like. So we could, if you guys are willing to keep it, well, it's your meeting, so if you talk a long time, then your meeting goes longer.
I think that's a risk.
Chelsea, you won't be there.
Always.
So still won't be the, she's.
That's okay.
But it might, you can ask Brian if that works better for him on the 27th.
I can make either one of those over again.
Yeah.
I'll be there. It's just.
The 27th.
Either the trustee regular meeting on the 25th, our regular meeting on the 27th, or a special meeting for the trustees on the 7th.
I mean, really, this is, that meeting is for you guys. It just, you guys have to provide us with that proposed charter. But I assume it's gonna be your time to, on the record, explain why you're doing the things that you do. So it's up to you.
I would also say that if you guys come up with things that you're curious about or you want to ask us, contact us. Send an email to the Board of Trustees, make a request through Malcolm or, just ask us. Don't feel like you have to assume, what we might think about a certain thing. We're a resource to you. So use us. My hesitance with public comment and my thought on suggesting that we have this meeting is that a 3-minute public comment is what's on my mind. And I speak for 3 minutes. It's not necessarily what's on your mind. And there needs to be a way for us to have dialogue or for you to be able to get clarity so that you feel comfortable with this decision you're making. So don't feel like you have to avoid us. We don't want to have inappropriate, meetings necessarily, but if something's on your mind, shoot a note to us and we'll work through that or give you a quick answer that can be disclosed to everyone.
I really like your idea of having narrative.
Yeah.
That's what we should consider that strong.
Yep. The why is more important than the what.
Yeah, my thought was that would be in the presentation, and then what we're doing in our entire thought, like the overarching thought process as we went through this.
No,
Just-
But like this charter is gonna last longer than us.
Hopefully.
So
I think 10 years from now, people would want to know, and they wouldn't look at a presentation, they look at the charter.
Wasn't the preamble? The purpose of it?
That's, which was.
I'd also say that I've shared this with Trustee Sawish, and I think I've mentioned this during public comment. Please don't take it personal when people don't engage on these topics. Let's try subject matter, that C-SPAN doesn't get as many viewers as Fox or CNN, because there's no drama. It's just the content. And so,
So you're saying we need to stage drama during it?
no.
Was elected the House Speaker, because there wasn't a speaker in the room. Yeah, so she smashed out everything.
So I would say that the average, greater than average resident of Erie has no idea what a charter is, nor do they care. 2/3 of Erie came to here within the last 12 years. They more than likely came from a place that was already home rule. And so they don't care because it's behind the scenes, it's, it's not something that they really need to concern themselves with. So if you don't get a lot of people reading the charter, you don't get a lot of people engaging your meetings, I don't think that's an indication of support or opposition. That's just a fact of life.
Actually, so one of the things you said before, could you send us a list, like just the entire commission, send us that list of things you found out you couldn't do when you started?
If I can remember.
Yeah. Because we've had that.
It was like one by one, right?
What are the things?
Hey, can you do this? No.
So to summarize the scheduling. Not May 2nd.
Nor can the chair.
I can't make May 2nd.
Okay, so that's probably out.
May
So
2nd,
there's
yeah.
either the 25th at our regular meeting, or we make the 27th
A special meeting.
a special meeting of the board of trustees.
Yes.
Yep, which we could do that. We could do another day too, if you guys want.
Saturday morning.
Special meetings can be scheduled anytime.
Yeah.
As long as they're ordered.
Please no Saturdays. Meeting numbers for each are Malcolm, Gabby and I.
guess we- yeah, I don't think the Commission, we've had a chance to look.
We just talked about Tuesday.
Yeah. So we'll discuss internally and figure out on Thursday what we can do. Although, yeah, we'll need to contact with Brian because he's not gonna be here Thursday either. So, okay.
So we'll
Way to do it.
decide, I guess,
Yeah,
on
we'll figure
Thursday,
it out.
if we're gonna take your Tuesday, take a portion of your Tuesday meeting,
Or call you in on the Thursday.
call you in on Thursday.
Malcolm, do we have room on the 25th? We did.
It's only 130 minutes right now.
Only-
And we can make room if we need to.
57 cents an hour goes down.
Heck, we're not even to 3 hours yet, so.
We're gonna start at, because it's nothing.
You guys are up against the time clock, so if we need to move things around. To make it fit.
Well, May 6th is our deadline, so as long as we get you presented to the signed charter to you by May 6th, we're good.
Start practicing your signatures.
I'm just hoping it'll be a common circumstance like a State of the Union. Where somebody's announcing everybody's name as they walk in.
Requisition fireworks.
I'm taking the Bulls game, kind of.
I think,
No,
we're done.
Yes.
Very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for the
Thank you, guys.
invitation. Thank you for all the work.
Thank you guys for coming and helping us and information.